Here in Saudi Arabia today, it was not possible to overshadow the president's visit with other news, but it was close. Prime Minister Thatcher's resignation in Britain brings to an end one of the most important periods of political leadership in any Western nation since the end of World War II. It was, for example, Mrs. Thatcher who first told George Bush he would have to deploy the military to force Saddam Hussein to pay attention. Mrs. Thatcher, who sent her own military in to do battle with Argentina after the Argentinians invaded the Falkland Islands. Margaret Thatcher, who told Ronald Reagan that the West could do business with Mikhail Gorbachev. No other leader in the Western Alliance has served so long. ABC's Barry Dunsmore is in London.
Many of the ministers who came to this morning's cabinet meeting had warned Mrs. Thatcher last night she had lost so much support within her party that she would probably lose the leadership race. Still, they were astonished when Thatcher told them she accepted the arguments that in the best interests of her party, her country, and her place in history, she should step down. As the cabinet left, much of Britain and many of Thatcher's closest supporters were in a state of shock.
She is an outstanding leader not only of our country and of the world, and I do not believe we will see her like again.
On her arrival in the House of Commons, Mrs. Thatcher was cheered by many of the very members who had voted against her. This is Margaret Thatcher's favorite arena, and she has never been better in defending her philosophy of free market capitalism.
Over her 11 years, the gap between the richest 10% and the poorest 10% in this country has widened substantially.
But what the honourable member is saying is that he would rather the poor were poorer, provided the rich were less rich. That way you will never create the wealth for better social services as we have. And what a policy! Yes, he would rather have the poor poorer.
This laughter came when someone suggested that in her retirement, she could become head of a European central bank, a bank whose creation she has fiercely fought.
What a good idea. Now, where were we? I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this.
Indeed she was, as were friend and foe. Under Margaret Thatcher, relations between the U.S. and Britain have been very close. It is said here, she not only told President Reagan what she thought, she told him what he thought, too. Beyond telling Mr. Reagan he should do business with the new communist leader, she supported U.S. policy across the board, including now in the Gulf. Today, President Bush paid his tribute.
I think everybody in America would agree that Margaret Thatcher has been an outstanding ally for the United States.
Thatcher easily survived a no-confidence vote in Parliament tonight, but it was her own party's lack of confidence in her ability to win the next general election which cost her her job. Barry Dunsmore, ABC News, London.
And so Britain must now adjust to life without Margaret Thatcher. It may well take time. And while it may be true that by staying so long she made herself politically vulnerable, the man who succeeds her will have to get used to being compared. ABC's Sheila McVicker has been looking at the would-be successors.
3 men have entered the race to succeed Margaret Thatcher. All have sat in her shadow for years. Some conservatives say none measures up to her. Douglas Hurd, Foreign Secretary, and John Major, Britain's Treasurer, have been 2 of Thatcher's most loyal ministers. Michael Heseltine, once Minister of Defense, quit her cabinet 4 years ago. A multimillionaire, he has made no secret of his ambitions. Heseltine has been most critical of Thatcher's policies on economics and taxes and promises changes. Douglas Hurd is an old-style conservative. Educated at those most British schools, Eton and Cambridge, he spent years as a professional diplomat. He's been called uncharismatic, but as Foreign Secretary, his stature has grown. The need now, he says, is to unify the Conservative Party.
We can't go on like this. These divisions are disastrous.
John Major is the least experienced politician of the candidates. He dropped out of school at 16, and after a career in banking, entered politics. Thatcher made him her senior economic advisor. Analysts say she was grooming him as her heir. Political columnist Simon Hogarth compared them to Margaret Thatcher.
They've all got much more in common with each other than they have with her, and I think the one thing we're going to see in a week or so is a kinder, gentler Britain.
Conservative members of Parliament vote next week. Whoever wins will succeed Margaret Thatcher as Prime Minister.